Thank you for that. Thank you. Yes, so I'm going to go ahead now and give introductions to our distinguished panelists, ending with Dr. Samy Alim, who I will let you know in full who he is, because I think some folks don't even know who we have in the building. So first up, I'm going to invite to the stage is Miss Jayda Holsey. She's a second-year film and media student who's representing our hip-hop class. She's our film and media student, and I was like, you know what, we need that perspective up here, because we're watching a documentary, so she's going to be representing. She says her initial interest in the film has, over the past few years, developed into a deep passion. In her studies, she aims to gain a deeper understanding of the power of cinema and how to use it as a tool for social justice. Yes, right? Round of applause for that. She is particularly interested in representation and making cinema an inclusive space for all. Upon graduation, she intends to pursue documentary filmmaking. She aspires to bring attention to underrepresented communities in her home of Atlanta, Georgia. Cool. Yes. Looking forward. All right. Next panelist I have up is Miss Romonda Middlebrook Jefferson. I'll go ahead and invite her to the stage. All right, Ms. Middlebrook Jefferson is a PhD student in our College of Ed. Ooh, yeah. we good. And distinguished educator, right? Have a bio here prepared that allows you to know where she comes from, right? She's a native of Atlanta, and in Atlanta, Georgia, has spent 3 decades educating middle and high school students, right? As a teacher, instructional coach, and as assistant principal, right? Though most of her years were spent teaching English language arts, her years teaching history resulted in students engaging in cultural studies while building literacy skills. Ms. Jefferson is a social constructivist who believes students learn best when engaged in collaborative social justice projects. She believes that students who can read and write the world through literacy can publish work that has the potential to change the perception and quality of life for those who are in marginalized groups. Her research interests are Black educators and their culturally sustaining pedagogies in K-12 settings. Round of applause. Deep honor to have you with us. All right, and next I'm going to invite to the stage is we have a legend in the building, Emile YX. AKA B-Boy Warlock, or African One, is considered to be one of the godfathers of South African hip-hop and continues to be an active B-Boy, MC, graffiti artist, and hip-hop activist. He was the founder of the pioneering hip-hop breakdancing crew Pop Glide Crew from 1982, hip-hop group Black Noise, formed in 1988, and the Heal the Hood project started in 1998. In 1993, he created South Africa's first hip-hop magazine, The Juice. In 1997, he was part of the South African breakdance team that won third place at the World Break Dance Champs Battle of the Year, right? He has since, right, raised funds to send more than 250 young artists to international hip-hop events. In 2010, Heal the Hood Project won the award for the best hip-hop organization in the world. In 2016, he won the National Lead Essay Award as well as the ETV South African Heroes Award. In 2019, he was inducted into the South African Hip-Hop Museum's Hall of Fame. He has recorded and released 26 albums solo with Black Noise and in Mixed Mints. He features on numerous compilation albums released throughout the world. Emile has written and contributed 24 books, for which he won the Western Cape Arts and Culture Literary Award. His latest book is Reconnect the String, even though he's got another one that's popping out soon. He created and performed 5 plays, one of them being the award-winning play Afro Cops, which has another book that's on the way. He created numerous events like African Battle Cry, African and Hip Hop in Daba, Cape Flats Film Festival, the Positive Posters Week, Up Rock, Shut Up, Just Dance, just to name a few. Right? He has rocked the stage with famous artists and personalities like President Nelson Mandela, Brenda Fassie, the Queen of Sweden, Baba Mal, Salif Keita, Manu Dimbangu, Snoop Doggy Dogg, Kyle Shepard, Arrested Development, among numerous others. Right? So we are very, very, very happy to have Emile in the house. Thank you, Emile. And I am incredibly happy to invite my mentor, my advisor, who made me who I am, right, to the stage, who made this film, right, in this documentary. I say for my students who are like PhD students that it's like we're like in a feudal castle, and it's like you go in the castle and you learn how to make swords, and your advisor is the one who teaches you how to make swords, right? So if my sword is any good at fighting anybody, it's because Samy taught me, right, how to make a good sword. But anyway, I'm gonna invite Samy to the stage and let you know who he is. All right, 8th Samy Alim is the David O. Sears Presidential Endowed Chair in the Social Sciences and Professor of Anthropology at UCLA. He also serves as the Associate Director of the Ralph Bunche Center for African American Studies and is Faculty Director of what you heard about in the film, the UCLA Hip Hop Initiative with Tavia Shao and Samuel, right? And he's the editor with Jeff Chang of the University of California Press Hip Hop book series. And he's been researching and writing about hip hop culture for over 25 years, right? He is an author and editor of 12 books and has written extensively about Black language and hip-hop culture globally across the US, Spain, and South Africa. His books, Street Conscious Rap, Rock the Mic, The Global Cipher, Global Linguistic Flows, Culture-Sustaining Pedagogies, have all sold and made him one of the most prominent educational scholars in the world. Right? In his 2 co-authored oral histories of hip-hop culture with the great James Spady, he's interviewed so many artists that you know and love: Grandmaster Flash, Kool Herc, Queen Latifah, Big Daddy Kane, Scarface, Trina, Ice Cube, Corrupt, Snoop, Eve, Bahamadia, Big Pun, Common, Mos Def, Yassine Bey, Pharoah Monch, Chuck D, the Wu-Tang Clan, amongst so many others. We're incredibly lucky to have him with his documentary film premiere here in Atlanta. Thank you. Hand it over to Dr. Alim just to tell us the story of this documentary, because there's clearly a story that really built this.
There is a story, but before I tell the story, I just want to thank everyone for being here. It really is an honor to have folks watch the film and to be in conversation, so thank you for your presence. And also thank you, Casey. I need to have you introduce me everywhere I go. Like, can you introduce me to new friends, too? So thank you so much, Casey, and for everybody here at Auburn Avenue for putting this on. So just huge, huge thanks, and of course to everyone who's here, panelists, everybody. So there's a lot more thanks to go around. Tabia Shao, Samuel LaMontagne, Chuck D, of course, and so many people involved in the film. So the story of the film. We had this huge event at the California African American Museum in Los Angeles. And this was March 11th, 2020. Just reflect on that date for a second. And it was a panel, and we had Chuck D on stage, we had Talib Kweli on stage, and we had Rakim on stage, on the same stage, and we were celebrating Rakim's new book that he wrote with Bakari Kitwana. And as Chuck was talking, so they had this dialogue, and it was beautiful back and forth. And Chuck was talking, and he was going real deep and waxing poetic about Rakim's poetics. So he was telling everybody why Rakim's such a dope artist, why he's an MC, why he's a poet. And he was telling all these stories. He's our Miles Davis. He's our Louis Armstrong. He's all these, he's revolutionized, right, what we've done with hip-hop and rap and poetics. And he said, but y'all don't know that because there's no university class on that. So I'm sitting in the front row while he says that, and light bulbs go off. And so afterwards, I beelined it to him, along with Tabia Shao and Kelly Lytle Hernandez of the Ralph Bunche Center for African American Studies. Just beelined it to him, and I said, you know what you said up there? Why don't you come over and teach this class with us at UCLA? And so that started the conversation. So in 2022, he came and gave this whole giant class, 10 weeks, 3 hours a pop, where he would lecture for an hour. There'd be a dialogue with a scholar for an hour, and then there would be Q&A, an open conversation for an hour. So that's sort of the long story about how that came about. And we've just been working on the film, and the accompanying book is about to drop next year. So thank you. Yeah, if you got your appetite whet a little bit from the snippets of the conversation that you heard in this, now we're about to go, like I said in the film, much deeper than the average conversation. It's going to be a 130,000 page word not page. Don't worry. Don't worry. No one's reading 130,000 pages, but 130,000 word book that's going to break this down even further. So I'm excited about that. Yeah. Thank you, Casey.
Amazing. Thanks, Dr. Alim. I've been building up Jayda for weeks, saying, you got to be ready for a question. So she's coming out first. So my first thing is, Jayda, what's the question you have for Dr. Alim?
A question I have for Dr. Alim is, being a student who's learning more about hip hop now, what is your goal for expansion? Like, this program was at UCLA. Where do you see it going for the rest of universities across the nation?
Ooh, that's a great question. My mic on though? We're here? Okay, good. I want to make sure I answer your question. My one word when Casey was going around about the one word was going to be two words. It's going to be hard work. Because it takes a lot to get a group of folks together across an entire university from all these different departments and perspectives to get students, undergraduate students on board, graduate students on board, the Bunch Center for African American Studies on board, to get everybody on board and to pull this. I mean, it almost, even when I just look back at one class, it feels like a miracle. Like, how the heck did that happen? You got Robin D.G. Kelly in conversation, Jeff Chang, Davy D., Joan Morgan, Chuck D., and they all come at the specified time in this 10 weeks to make that happen. So hard work is the first thing that comes to mind to even pull off something of this magnitude. But what I will say, so not in terms of what the next steps would be, it's happening right now. And I would say it's been happening for at least the last 3 decades, if not more, where hip hop has come into the academy and courses have been taught since the 90s. And so that already in 3 decades has grown into a national sort of movement of hip hop studies in the US and internationally, Cape Town, South Africa, and beyond, right? In every university, there's these courses being taught. What we wanted to do was to kind of have a critical mass that would take care of the culture with the rigor and respect that it deserved. And that's a hard thing to do in scale. Like, you can't necessarily scale up what's in someone's heart. So working with Chuck, the thing that you see over and over again, and you know that's true, right? When you see over and over again is his deep commitment to the culture and to the people from which hip-hop came. And that's first and foremost for me. So when we talk about the UCLA Hip Hop Initiative and everything we've been working really hard to build, it comes down to that. Like, he tells us, you could either be an undertaker of the culture or you could be a caretaker of the culture. And which one are you going to be? Right? And he'll look at you just like that and ask you the question. And so I think when we try to do it at UCLA, it's hard enough of a job to do the work with that kind of commitment and care and rigor and respect, to consider yourself even a caretaker of a culture, right? Because it could be that academia wants to then control the narrative of hip-hop culture in the same way corporations do. So that's really dangerous, like really dangerous. That's more dangerous than corporate control, okay? There's a reason why we write the book, Freedom Moves Hip-Hop Knowledges, Pedagogies, and Futures, because the knowledges that come from hip-hop and the communities that gave birth to hip-hop, that's what's important and that's what's key, right? So I'm very, very careful about a sort of academic colonization of hip-hop and hip-hop knowledge and history. That would be the worst possible thing that could happen. So I'm not necessarily for, let's do this and put flags down everywhere we go. I'd rather connect with folks who are doing it on the real, whether they're in the academy, on the street, in the organizations, or not. That's my first and foremost. And the last thing I will say about that I think is really important is you saw over and over again, and I probably said it way too many times, but working on hip-hop culture and studying hip-hop culture doesn't mean sitting up on some university place far away, like on some hill, looking down on hip hop culture and being like, ooh, with a magnifying glass, or like some anthropologist coming down from Mars being like, what is this verbal flow, right? That's not the thing. So part of why we do this with Chuck is because it's a metaphor really for how we want to do the work, which is with the culture creators themselves. And we said that phrase over and over again. That goes back to Black Philadelphia historian James G. Spady and his term hip-hopography. So anytime anyone wanted to study hip-hop culture, he ensured that it was done collectively and with artists at the table as co-creators of the knowledge, co-producers of the knowledge, right? Because without that, it's only going to be that kind of academic colonization, because there's different interests. Let's just be real. The academy has different interests than hip-hop does. And so that's why we do it with the artists. So I don't want to scale up like that, but I do want us maybe to move intentionally with that kind of care and that kind of co-commitment.
And just building with that, I know we've talked about it, and I'm going to bring in Ms. Jefferson, Romonda, to talk about this, is it seems like pedagogy is really key as a part of this process. And I'm curious, you, with all these years of experience, when you watch this film, right, what does it make you think about in terms of like education just in this conversation?
So, is my mic on? Hi. What I think about culture and language, that which we own. Hip hop in the classroom, in schools, was the way that I communicated with students, and I communicate with them today. This is what it makes me think of. It makes me wonder if, in fact, there is a plan to bring educators in so that they can push to youth in the community and begin to communicate and give them hope and messages of resistance, and for them to be able to understand that there is something that they can do about their situations. Because without hip hop, there would be no way for those of us who are academically trained, who may have the same experiences as the children that we teach, to be able to talk to them, for them to be able to understand why we're trying to do what we're trying to do.
Oh, wow, that's a great question. I could say so much on that. As far as the UCLA Hip Hop Initiative, one of the things that we're trying to do is create a high school to higher learning hip hop pipeline. So I would love it if there was, we talked about this with Casey, about possibly having this film be shown at the high school level, and also the teachers who are working with youth, as a way to kind of get the hip hop studies curriculum going at the high school level, because you shouldn't have to wait till you get to college, right? Most people don't know that you could show up. I didn't know. I'm a kid growing up in Jersey at the roller rink, you know, and hip hop was just, it was just part of what was there and what I was hearing constantly, not having any clue that I would show up 20 years later or 15 years later in a college classroom with a course on hip hop culture being taught at my university, thinking, what is this? How did this even happen? And first of all, just a moment of honesty, being like, what in the hell is this college professor gonna tell me about hip hop culture? And I came in arrogant as hell, and then had my mind blown, like, I didn't understand all these polysyllabic words that people were using in these cultural studies, theories, texts, talking about counter-hegemonic, et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, oh, what? Okay, I thought I knew, right? But so in trying to make that some kind of network would be a wonderful thing, I think, for the future. The other thing I want to say to that, and there's two more things, is I want to talk a little bit about Chuck's pedagogy, because that's what the question made me think, Casey, and I know you would vibe with this, dealing with a culturally sustaining pedagogical approach, which is you saw a little bit, just a tiny little bit of Chuck's pedagogy, like how he teaches, the way that he teaches. And you laughed a few times in the film, right? Because that's one of the things that he does best is laughter as part of the pedagogy. So he's hitting on something really heavy, right? Globalization, U.S. cultural imperialism, right? The kind of arrogance of the United States, both politically and culturally. And then we'll make a joke about, well, it ain't bigger than the whole damn world, right? And he'll throw in these jokes at just the right time to have students kind of listening to it and hook to it. But then he would also be very visual. And so if you looked at his notes before class, like if you had a clipboard, and which I got to sneak away some of his clipboards and look at the notes, there's triangles and squares and circles and lines connecting and scribbles here and paintings there. And then I'm watching him lecture from it. And it's coming out like prose, like this. And I'm like, how are you doing that? But that's how he was visually. Those paintings that you see, those drawings, those lines, those are his. So he's a visual artist as well, working with line, charcoal, paint, etc. He's done museum exhibitions just on his visual art. He doesn't even like to talk about it that much, but that's part of also what he does. So what I'm trying to say that there's a way that the pedagogy itself could be looked at in this film, because it's not, you can't just walk up in a high school with a hip hop book. Like, people used to ask me all the time, because I've been teaching hip hop in school since 1997. This was back in Philadelphia. And then once more people started doing it, it was like there was a whole community of people doing it. And then, can we please have this in a box? Because we want to teach this in Massachusetts, Connecticut. We want to do this in Wyoming. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, there's no way it's going to go. Wyoming, fam. Yeah. And I'm like, you cannot box this. So pedagogy in this case has to always be locally situated, constantly negotiated, all the time. It cannot be put in a box. So I feel like it's similar to the question of scaling up. It's how do we do it how do we do the pedagogy and do the educational mission justice when it comes to hip hop education. And we have one of the world's leading experts right here.
Yeah, and on that note, Emile, like, you look at this and you've traveled around the world, seen multiple different contexts of hip hop education's being applied, multiple different types of folks. You see this film, like, what's on your mind when you think about that?
Wow, a lot. For me, it's always about how do you decode what academia encodes. It takes from the artist and then it puts it into these big words, and then it never really gets back to the community again. So when you're speaking about going to even this, thinking about like what the youth are confronted with and the speed of it, this to them will be quite long. So how you package it and how the content is actually shared needs to be looked at, and maybe have them look at how that content can be shared amongst each other. Because there's just like Chuck's generation, my generation, like it's worlds apart. The kids are scrolling. Yeah, screenagers, exactly what he said, So you need to get them where they are. And that for me is like probably the main part about the change. Like we work in South Africa in 15 schools. And when we start, because the kids are on the screens, it's so much more difficult to keep on stage, right? And by the end of the year, kids got a mic, doing a rhyme in front of the entire school. And for me, like that is not written about in the way that when it's shared, it's not done in a way that it's like, this is how you put this together in a book form. It's just like, yo, here's a mic, here's the rhymes, go into a corner over there. Some kids are dancing over here, make him feel a bit more comfortable. They move from that corner to a bigger crowd, then onto the stage. So it's a process that they understand, and it's easier for them. And you also, like Dave Chappelle says, no damn phones, right? Because someone's going to record it and embarrass one of those kids while the process is happening, while they're still learning, and so then that's the end of it. It's understanding where young people are at this point in time and how to get them to that point where they are confident enough to to grab the mic and to say what they feel, you know. So the packaging of it is important, you know, but very current to where young people are right now. And they masters at it. You know, they will look at that and be like, I can put it together in a different way, and let them do it, you know, because that's really what you want. You want it to spread in a way that they understand. You know? Yeah.
Did I just say something?
Oh, absolutely.
So I just want folks to know that I first met Emile 10 years ago.
On the beach.
On the beach in Muizenberg in Cape Town in South Africa. Walking, I said, you Emile YX? And also a shout out to his family who's here. Yeah. But it has been, I mean, actually, Emile could have probably better answered your question than I could have, because it's been such an amazing thing watching what he does in South Africa over the last decade. So I spent a month there, 2 or 3 months there, 4 months there, a week there, 2 weeks there over the last 10 years. And every time Emile and Heal the Hood project, the organization, is working in schools, so many schools. And I've seen what you have done with the end of the school performances and the way kids just grow and blossom. It really is an amazing thing, and it's a model. It's really a model for us to sort of look at more closely and to really figure out, Emile, how is it that you do that on scale? You're working with so many schools, schools with not many resources, and schools who are also, if I might say, still teaching colonial, you know, apartheid shit in the classroom. And Emile walks in with this hip-hop vision, right, and his whole crew, and they do the work tirelessly, day after day. You've seen it, day after day, month after month, year after year. So it really is a model. So I just want to give props to that, and just to kind of to talk about the question of pedagogy and how you do that. I've also seen you work with WhatsApp, with voice notes, and you have students writing, you know, on phones if they use their phones, and they're performing little snippets and they're sharing it with each other across networks. Every once in a while you see an actual paper and a pencil, right? So you're using all the modalities that they're used to. Yeah. And so you really, I mean, there's an hour-long answer from him, but he's being very, yeah.
Now, I think also the language, you know, for young people to speak in the language that they actually use. And on the Cape Flats in South Africa, the language is a Creole language, and they're not allowed to speak this language in school, because it's seen as it's almost like Ebonics, right? It's a gangster associated with everything negative. And so it's to embrace that and have them, because a lot of them don't want to speak, because they are told that the language they speak isn't good enough. It's not proper, it's not pure. And so when you give them that opportunity to speak the way they normally speak, you get the kids who are normally quiet coming to the fore and telling amazing stories, you know? And then you explain to the teacher why this kid can't read the bullshit that is being given them. The books are boring. There's no sound effects in the book. It's not told in the way that they know stories are told. And then you get them to, once they tell the story, to write down the story. And when they look at it, they're like, is that how that word is spelled? Because they've never seen it, because the language isn't written. And then the power of them, their story, taking it to their parents and their community and other kids reading it. Because now you've actually empowered them, instead of when the school system has actually taken away their power. And I think that's, like what I say, that the youth needs to be involved in the process of creating the pedagogy.
And on that note, too, we have a colleague, was it Jeff Chang, who always says this thing, arts and cultural change precedes political change. And we can't escape our moment that we're in right now. So my question is going to be to Dr. Alim, but then to everybody on the panel, because we come from multiple different hip-hop generations, right? Arts and cultural change, what are the things we can come from a culturally sustained perspective we need to sustain right now to get out of the mess that we're in? But more broadly, what do you see from the context, even like being in Atlanta, you know, in context of South Africa? What's the art and cultural things? What's the movement? What's the language that needs to happen to get us out of now? Yeah.
I'd love to hear what folks have to say on that, especially around Atlanta.
Go for it, Jayda.
Oh dear. What needs to be sustained in this culture? I think generationally, I think the way that new hip hop is ready to break barriers, I think the way that it's loud unapologetically needs to be sustained. In the context of Atlanta, I think there's a rich culture of hip hop here that is uniquely intertwined with a Southern culture that seeks community. And I think that should be sustained. And I think, yeah, I just think that hip hop should be loud and unapologetic and focused on community. And I want that to be loud.
Oh, yeah.
I think, and I come from the generation of those who would say the South have something to say. Grew up with them in the same communities and have invited them into school buildings and classrooms to come and speak to young people. What I think needs to be sustained is knowledge, historical knowledge, ancestral knowledge that is being erased. Our young people are very angry right now, and it is playing out in their behaviors that we see in what's going on in schools, in their cultures being erased. Hip hop can definitely put it back, and it can have them inspired to know what that knowledge is. You can't read the world, or you can read it and see destruction, or you can read it and see hope. You can see the future. And so it needs to be loud, and it needs to be expressed in a way that they need to express it as young people, not in the way that I express it, but in giving them that space and that freedom to be able to do so that we know what's on their minds, because this is now their fight. And they are intelligent, they are talented, they don't have to know all these words that we know here, because it's not what runs the world. It is not true knowledge. It's not what puts food on the table, clothes on our backs. It's not what houses us. So what we need to sustain, how do we get out of this now? Ancestral and generational knowledge.
Whew. All right. Yeah, you know, when I'm busy with this book called Creating Solutions. And the idea came to me that we look at art as something that's separate from us. Like, those are artists. When in truth, we are all creators. Right? We can manifest our ideas. And I come from a breakdance background, so I didn't speak for many years. I'm making up for that now. And when I danced, I was speaking with my body, because we were silenced in South Africa. And so when I see hip hop culture only being presented as rap, it really bothers me, because there are many black people who feel the same way I do. They do visual art, they do a lot of different, they're not rappers, but they have something to say. We're just not hearing them. You understand what I'm saying? And so I also, in this book, speak about the power of creation. Like, if you have the list that you were reading, if it wasn't for my belief that I could manifest the dance move, I thought it, and I jumped and I spun on my head. And it seemed impossible initially, but I made it real without having to speak. So when I rapped, it was a demand on me to manifest my words. Like a kid one day at the school, I was like, you see that library over there? All the lies are kept in that library. You know, Public Enemy, Black Consciousness. And it's European-based information in the libraries, even here in your schools right now. It's still Eurocentric, right? We're not dominant as African or black people in that space. They own that space. And so when I said that, a kid said, yeah, but when did you write the book? It's like, oh, okay. You're keeping me account. When I come back to the school, I'll bring a book. And the next time I came back to the school, I gave the kid a book. It was called My Hip Hop is African and Proud. And I was foolish to give it to him at the beginning of our performance. By the middle of the performance, he was like, yo, there's so many spelling errors in this book. And I was like, yo, if you can point that out, then you can write a book. You know? And he was like, oh. And from that lesson, as I tell stories, I can visualize the illustration. I can visualize the animation. Right? And we're forgetting this. When my kids were born, I was about to sing Ashabai Baby. And I slapped myself against the head. I was like, how the hell do I sing this colonial crap and I'm speaking about change? And so I freestyled the songs that they know, right? So they know lullabies that I wrote. And so I broke the cycle myself. Do you understand? So for me, when you ask about creation, to come back to your question, this is the power we have. We can solve our problems ourselves. But they are very clever. They place it outside, and I'm saying they as in education, they place it outside of the reach of this idea that someone has to come and help you. You can't solve your own problems. So it's a very clever technique to remove your power from you. You know, so if you want to change things, we need to place the power back in the hands of the people. To know that you can bring about change in your life. Because creativity is about changing your personal, then your family, then your community, then your country, then the world. And that is the real power that I feel when you speak about arts and culture, that we actually have, but we just don't know that we have it. In the same way that the South Bronx, they said there was nothing. I hate that word because there wasn't nothing. There were people of African descent that brought thousands of years of knowledge of who their ancestry was with them. It wasn't nothing. And they connected to that. They formed a circle. They clapped their hands. They did cyclic loops. Hey, hey, hey. And that became the loop and the beat. Because the beat is a loop. And that loop became what drove them into trance, into the break dance. Like our ancestors. And they wrote on rock. And they wrote on the wall. So-called graffiti. So these elements belong to who we've always been. They just found it. And we're in a position on this planet right now when we all feel like we have nothing. Even if we have everything, this is the richest place in the world. And people are constantly hustling as if they have nothing. Like there's no sense of abundance, there's only a sense of scarcity. Anyway, I stopped preaching.
I mean, I think that speaks to, if there's anything left to say, because that, I mean, not just, all the responses were just so good, brilliant, and gave me insights on different levels. So thank you for that. But it relates, what you're saying relates directly to two things. One, black creativity for survival. That's a reason why when we talk about hip hop, Chuck is always saying, that's just the term that was given to this period of time, right? It's always been about black creativity for survival. That is in the midst of the harshest, most brutal conditions. Black people are always creating culture, music, language, song, dance, movement, flow, black creativity for survival. So that's the first thing that you make me think of is over the generations, right? In centuries, that has been the case. The second thing, in your comments were incredible about sustaining intergenerational knowledge, and they're very linked, right? The intergenerational knowledge that is taken for granted. Because we are talking about survival. I mean, the other thing is, we talk about scarcity, right, as a scare tactic when there is abundance. But there are very real material, oppressive, white settler colonial conditions that have put people in that mindset, right? And the necessity, the material necessity to survive is something that has actually happened pedagogically over generations. It's not by accident, right, that our cultures, histories, languages, philosophies are hidden and not taught and not centered at all. That is not an accident. We know this, right? We know it. So in working on culturally sustaining pedagogies, in other words, you bring all this richness, this history, this folklore, this language, this power, right, this culture, this knowledge, to your encounter with the educational system, only to be met with violence. All that you bring must now be eradicated in the service of turning you into a monocultural, monolinguistic clone. A weak, thin, diluted version of yourself, right, in the service of becoming just like them. Right? So we have a system actually set up not to sustain, but to eradicate. Right? So what would happen if we took that system, all of us, and built a system that was designed so when we come to that encounter with schooling, we are not only just valued, oh, let's use their language to take them over here. So we were talking about, let's use their language and have them learn this. No. What if we turned the educational system inside out and sustained what we brought? And now guess what? You all got to come along. Because that is a real tragedy, right? When we talk about kids in Cape Town or in Atlanta or in East Palo Alto or in Philly. Toni Morrison said it best. Philly. The language that a black child will bring to their encounter with schooling has more present tenses than the so-called standard, has a more complex tense aspect system than the so-called standard, has a wide, flexible variety of orthographic innovations more than the so-called standard, can do more things, right, with the same sounds than the so-called standard. So we're coming with more and being taught that is less. You know what I'm saying? So how about sustaining that? And that's that knowledge piece and that intergenerational piece that is relevant here, South Africa, and everywhere where people are under that kind of domination and inside that belly of the beast. It's the same game, right?
Absolutely. Woo. Should almost end right there, but audience, I definitely want to give folks out there an opportunity to ask questions. So I'm going to ask one more question, but think of your question and be ready. I'm going to put this microphone on the floor over here. Feel free to come up, or I think there might be a way where you can come up to the stage, however you feel comfortable. But my last question is, in watching this documentary, we see, right, people say like, oh, a circle just by itself or a cipher by itself is revolutionary. But when you say Black freedom culture, right, and we see all the different forms of representation across this film, right, which is not something to take for granted. That is a part of this project that you are a part of. And I know, of course we know each other with James Spady, and you've taught me all sorts of things about traditions where you got this from. But I was wondering if you could really speak to that language, culture, Black freedom culture, and this cipher, right? It's not just a circle. It's something that includes, expands, and builds, and does constant critical work. And I wonder if you just can speak on that.
It's a collective. I mean, it's what gave Teresa Johnson in the film when she was like, you can't do this alone. Hip hop has always been done in collectivity, in community. That's what the cipher is. It's a collective. And let me just be clear, the cipher doesn't always have to be revolutionary. The cipher can be mad oppressive. There are some ciphers I don't want to be in, right? And there are some ciphers that are not for everybody. The format itself is not the revolution. You know what I'm saying? Is what we do with that format. Even if it is rooted historically, even if over time, even if it has the healing power, all those things that we talk about, when you step into ciphers today, what ciphers are you stepping in? Right? And is there a mission of justice for some in the cipher, or is it justice for all in the cipher? And the reason why I bring this up is because when we were doing the book, Freedom Moves, and Casey, we had these conversations, me, you, Jeff. We needed a whole section of the book to talk about how we can take the cipher forward and how are people within hip-hop evolving hip-hop itself. So when you get to that last section, you have queer, Black, feminist, disabled critiques of hip-hop culture coming from within the culture. These are not people from outside being like hip-hop is whack because X, Y, and Z. These are people who lived hip-hop saying, you know what? I wasn't a part of that justice project. So how are we going to evolve hip-hop with the times, right, to include communities that have been excluded? And so the cipher can also do that. If the cipher is innovative enough and flexible enough to allow for those rebirths, right? When David D talks about hip hop as being open sourced, that's one of the ways. There's a constant rebirth of what hip hop is, right? It may be in our individual heads rooted to the time that we were most active in it, but it is constantly reborn all the time. So when I think of Crip Hop, Leroy Moore, who was one of the co-founders of Crip Hop Nation, what they're dealing with is incredible. So you had, within hip hop, they were dealing with ableism. So some ideologies against disabled people from within hip. Now you can't be in this cipher. You stand out there, right? So that's real. So they come and invent hip. Now they're dealing with hip hop's ableism, the larger black community's ableism, the whiteness and racism of the disability rights movement. So you got white folks on this side being racist as hell but trying to help disabled people, but you're black and disabled. Then you got black folks on this side who are for the movement and for everybody but not you. So where do you find your place? And if that sounds like the situation black feminists found themselves in since the beginning of hip hop, then there's a reason for that. So all I'm saying is yes to the cipher. I've seen some spine-tingling, scalp, you know what I mean, tingling spiritual moments where there's nothing like the cipher and what we can do when we're in one. Even if it's a metaphorical cipher like the one we're having now, right? But also, what are we doing in it to challenge and to continually evolve the culture from within? I don't want to have a conversation from without anymore, because hip-hop's so diverse and so creative intellectually enough from the inside that we're turning the culture inside out, rethinking it all day long, and the corporate conversation and every other conversation is only interested in one thing, and that's the bottom line. So we need to have this conversation as a way to evolve the cipher.
For real, thank you. Yes, round of applause. On that note, questions from the audience before we leave? All right, we got in the back.
Yes, I have a question for Samy, Alim. So my question is, what were some of the major texts that you assigned in your class? And when I say text, I mean more broadly than just literature.
I could give you some stuff from my very first lecture. So this class begins with like a 20, 30-minute lecture called What is Hip Hop? And I know that sounds lame, but after 50 years, when Chuck was talking about you can't even define what you love, we were feeling that. That's part of how we set up the course was we're having students in the classroom who really we're not talking about the same thing when we talk about hip-hop culture. We're actually talking about very different things. In fact, how many people are in this room? There's as many definitions of hip-hop actually, right? So what is it that we're talking about? So just to set the foundation, I always use James G. Spady's Nation Conscious Rap. Okay, that's a classic Nation Conscious Rap. I use Trisha Rose's Black Noise, Imani Perry's Prophets of the Hood, Jeff Chang's Can't Stop, Won't Stop. Those are, as far as books are concerned. There's a great book called Freedom Moves. I use those as text, but in the very first lecture, I play clips from Tupac. I'm sure some of you have seen the Tupac interviews that are online, and where he's hitting hard and providing his own definition of what racial capitalism is. And it's better than any academic could ever do it, right? So those interviews are really important to me. I use Bay Area hip-hop in that text, San Quinn, JT the Bigger Figure. This is Bay Area hip-hop in San Francisco. Particularly a song called What I've Done for Them by San Quinn. And the reason why I use that is because if it's set up, the video, first of all, the song's amazing, and it comes out at a particular moment of time where I was in San Francisco, in the Bay Area. Whew, this must have been, I don't know how many years ago now, 15 years ago now? 20 years ago? Damn. And in a span of 3 weeks, 21 black men were murdered in Bayview Hunters Point. And it's turf war, that whole situation. So 1 per day, every single day for 3 weeks. And you could imagine families, mothers, fathers losing their mind about my son, my son, my son. Will my son be next, et cetera. And those conversations that were happening at that time were so real that San Quinn spoke to that. And he literally brought people back to life in that song, In Memoriam, and spoke to all of those who passed. And it's a notebook, and you get to see Polaroid pictures popping up and writing and scribbling of the lyrics on the margins. And it makes me think that's what hip-hop started out as voices on the margins, voices from the margins speaking back to the center, right, about the terms of their position. And that's Trisha Rose's Black Noise. She writes about that. So you connect the texts to what hip-hop is doing theoretically, right, and you create a bigger conversation, more ways for students to enter and understand what is happening. When they're listening to this music, it's so much more than what you would ever hear on the radio. And even when you do hear it, are you listening to the person's whole body of work? Are you listening just for the pop track, or are you listening for the 2, 3, 4 deep cuts that are giving you exactly what you're asking for? Right? So it's ways to kind of mix up those mediums between internet interviews, music videos, and of course those critical texts. Those are just some things in the very beginning. Sure.
Yeah, thank you. And then I got from Mr. Simmons the Wrap It Up box. So we got a burning question. Oh, we got another one back there. Yep, go for it.
So I'm really interested in the message or the point of teaching this sort of information, and I wonder what your thoughts are on how this information should be taught moving forward, considering the sort of disconnect between generations inside of the hip-hop community, and also because the ecosystem of how hip-hop as a music is sold is so much different, since record labels kind of broke up the ecosystem that allowed hip-hop to be what it was in its earlier stages. So how do you see that kind of moving forward? I'm from Philly, and I was interested in knowing what school you taught at.
Philly, Turner.
Shout out, Remington.
Turner Middle School, Southwest.
Oh, you want me to take the one? Yeah.
That's you.
You know, for me, the purpose of hip-hop as pedagogy is not for the system. And I think that's one of the big mistakes we make, is like, everyone is trying to get young people to go to university, to study, be part of the system, buy into capitalism, and that's the intention. And for me, that's not it. For me, pedagogy is about the kid finding what their purpose is on this planet. That is what pedagogy is about. And so when you ask that question, you have to look at the entire education system and what is the purpose of education. Do we learn to earn, or are we actually learning to learn, to change? It is it's criminal that at this final hour of our presence on this planet, being faced with climate change, that no school, university has centered climate as something to focus on. For young people, especially young people, their entire lives are going to be impacted by this. So it just shows that the direction that we're going in, it seems to be completely misguided. If we're really concerned about the future, our children, then we should be focusing on what will impact them the most. And actually, what is it that they want on this planet? The fact that we have these old-ass presidents all over the world is another example of like no concern for the future, you know? So for me, it's like that, those are the things that we need to grapple with. And the way to do that is, in our case, we work with because there's this Jesuit priest statement that they made back in the day, give me a child until he's 7 and I'll show you the man. It's a very clever technique to use information to change young people's minds so that the trajectory is what they want, not what we want. And so you have to look at how do we change that in order for us to really bring about.
Could I just add something to that, like just to provide the the complement to that statement, because I agree with everything Emile just said. But to think about pedagogy in individual terms is a beautiful thing if human beings were sort of without constraint, right? But all those human beings as individuals are going to be constrained by institutions, right? And so one of the hidden sort of curricular things of this film is that this is what I hope higher education looks like. I don't want to have those young kids that you're working with just go to college so they can take all of the classes that we suffered and sat through by people who were, perhaps even mediocre teaching us about stuff and then teaching us about African history and all this stuff. And are you kidding? I don't want them to have to sit through that in those classes all the way from high school all the way up, right? I would rather institutions look like that. The only reason that I'm saying that, Emile, is because I've seen you enter institutions and transform them from the inside out. And I think that's one thing hip-hop could do, if it's truly committed at its most powerful, is to transform for this institution of higher learning, what it looks like. I don't want people necessarily to come to higher education only to reproduce higher education. If they're not actually learning something and using it, right, to better the community. I had a college mentor when I was in college very early on who was like, knowledge for what? And I was like, oh, wow, like this, I get this. I'm going to ride with him for a little bit. And it gets you going on to different people, right? I had another a black feminist theory instructor who was trying to tell me about gender relations, and I just thought it was a way to us to understand social. And she was like, feminism for what? I said, oh, God, right? So if we could have higher learning that wasn't just one or two people that you had to cling to in order to get that, but that looked more like this, that had different voices in it, that had artists involved, that had disabled folks, women, like the whole thing that Casey was saying as it being kind of this intentional, diverse human family, that's a way to turn the institution around from the inside out. Then whoever, right, is the next wave, and the next wave will have a different mission. Right? So there's some ways to kind of build off of what Emile is saying, given the constraints of the institutions that we're in. What can we do within them? And hip-hop's never shied away from transforming where it was at. So it's possible. Maybe. I'll leave it on maybe.
Yeah, we'll end it there. Yeah, thank you so much to our distinguished panelists. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yes, and to our audience, thank you for your deep engagement and for all you're doing. I think we have a call to action. Thank you again, and yes, we'll keep it moving. All right.